Marvel Cinematic Universe has been around since 2008, with the release of Iron Man culminating its first phase with the 2012's Avengers. The MCU has released 17 films, with their most recent being Thor Ragnarok, and they stand at number 1 as the highest-grossing franchise of all time, besting the second highest-grossing franchise, the J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World franchise, by around $5 billion. Critically, the films have all been well-received, and financially, aside from the small hiccup of The Incredible Hulk, all of the films have done very well at the box office.
I want to start by saying that although Marvel has made a lot of money, more money than the Wizarding World of J.K. Rowling, I want to be fair that Harry Potter only had 8 movies. I want to reiterate that.
But you have to keep in mind that I actually, is because I said J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World. Harry Potter had 8 movies, but then there's the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and then there's going to be 4 more movies in the J.K. Rowling Wizarding World universe, and then probably more from there.
So we'll see whenever we get there. But I noticed, too, that Thor 3 Ragnarok, the video discussing Thor, that you guys can check out if you are interested in our synopsis of Thor 3, was the first video that we did not discuss Harry Potter. Every other video we have at least alluded to or mentioned Harry Potter, and I think that was the first video that we have not talked about Harry Potter.
How did we allude to it during Stranger Things?
I don't remember, but I do remember saying something about Harry, because I remember saying, in every one of our videos, we talk about Harry Potter, and that's just something that I've noticed that we do. Or at least I do. I think I equate a lot of it to Harry Potter, especially when I'm talking about world building and things like that. You know, talking about how we're doing the expansion of characters, and it's because I love Harry Potter and the way that everything developed throughout that. So that's probably why we talk about it so much.
Well, first and foremost, I just ask, what do you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe does best? What do you think is the best thing that they have going for them?
I'll reiterate what I said in the Thor 3 Ragnarok video, is that I really like how the characters are not taking themselves to the extreme point of seriousness. One of the things that I don't like when a bunch of superheroes get together and they brood and they talk about how bad they have it, or they think about all the depressing things that are going on. In Marvel's cinematic universe, you have a lot of things that have happened bad to the characters, but again, you have it to where they actually are living a more normalized life where they're having fun, they're having a good time. It looks like a bunch of group of friends that are together whenever they're, especially when they're in the Avengers or things like that. You know, aside from Civil War where they're killing each other. But even in that, you know, they kind of got that close-knit bond where it looks like they're actually a group of individuals instead of just 5 people who were thrown together to be on a team. And I think that's the difference in Marvel, is that you're able to connect more with those characters.
I think that it depends what iteration of Marvel we're talking about, but in general, yeah, I would agree with you. The humor is definitely the best aspect about the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this current time. However, I look back and I think about the first Thor movie, I think about Iron Man, Captain America, The Incredible Hulk, and those weren't really that funny. Iron Man was great.
Robert Downey Jr. is hilarious. I don't know what
but
you're
it wasn't. But it wasn't like it wasn't as comedic.
It wasn't campy humor, no, but it was still funny.
But it wasn't the same humor as what it would go on to.
I guess what I want to allude to is it wasn't that dark, brooding, dramatic. It was more of a easygoing kind of movie where you could just watch it and you didn't have to feel like you were depressed or dark.
But then how do you explain with Captain America, and Thor tries to be funny, the first Thor movie, as we've talked about in the Thor Ragnarok review.
I think it just missed a lot of dynamic. I don't think that Thor 1 had any dynamic. I didn't have anything substance that you can just grab onto and kind of, you know, hold on to while the whole earth is shaking around you. I didn't care.
And then I think that the first time, if I'm not mistaken, it was Iron Man 2 was whenever it first started to implement humor in a more heavily, and Iron Man 2 wasn't very good. It's
I didn't like Iron Man 2. I did not like Iron Man 3, so
I didn't like. Whenever I watched Iron Man 3, you and I both talked about it. We both kind of dismissed it as saying it sucked. It's just because I didn't like. It didn't give me what I wanted. It gave me closer to Iron Man 2 than it was to Iron Man 1, and the trailers themselves looked fantastic. I don't know if you remember the trailers for it, but
it looked amazing.
It looked great. And a lot of the reason that it looked great is because, quite honestly, it looked more serious, it looked more serious in that it had a better conflict and had more of a story to it. Like, I like comedy and I like the humor to it, but I also like there to be substance to it as well. A kind of thing that progresses them, that makes it seem like there's something at stake, makes it seem like there is... And, like, I'm very big into antagonists. Villains are my favorite part, mostly, of superhero films in general, is I think to myself, whenever I see a Batman movie, I'm like, who's the villain? More than I care about Batman, I care about the Joker. And...
Right, which is, I think, whenever we get to further on down in here, whenever we ask the question of, you know, what does Marvel do worst, I'm probably going to talk more about the villains. But another thing that they do really well is just making me care about the actual hero. Whereas you alluded to the Batman, you don't really, I mean, a lot of people do, but I didn't really find myself caring for any of the DC superheroes. But I do like to think that I have a sense of who Tony Stark is. I think that I have a sense of him. And he's not just that billionaire who was smart enough to make the Iron Man suit. He's also got deeper sides. And it was a progression.
He's also an egomaniac. He's very, very... And he's charismatic.
He's charismatic, but he's also done some humanitarian things. Yeah. Like, I mean, in the movie 3, whenever he's with the little boy, I mean, you can kind of see Tony Stark's softer side, and maybe he was... enveloping like a front, almost a mask per se, and not just the Iron Man suit. So I think that that's where you see a lot of good things coming from Marvel, is there is depth to their character. It's not just he's a brooding billionaire who doesn't really have any backstory, who doesn't really have anything except for that one centralized point. He has a bunch. And I think we see that started with Homecoming, which, again, I think is the best Spider-Man. I think that we saw that, Peter Parker now has a beginning, and it's more of I wasn't really good at this when I started. He wasn't really good at it at the end. And that's what I really liked about that movie as well, is that it shows that whenever he started, he was horrible at being a superhero. At the end of the movie, he wasn't much better. He was bad at the beginning, a little bit better at the end, but it did show progression. It showed his story and how he was able to overcome that. Yeah, a lot of it was funny, and I know that it had taken away from...
I don't have a problem with the comedy in... with Spider-Man Homecoming. Like, it's my criticism with Marvel, and which is not very good considering we're talking about what it does best. But I'm going to go ahead and just punch these two in together and say my criticism with Marvel is both the humor and the humor. I mean, the best thing is the humor, and the criticism is the humor, because it forces them to... It works against them, but it also works for them. Whereas, like, we talked about Thor Ragnarok, I felt that it was very humor-based, and that kept it from building strong conflict. And with Spider-Man Homecoming, I don't think the humor was bad in that. I think it was paced very well. I think that they avoided the origin story, which was a very good decision, because I did not want to see Spider-Man bit by anything anymore. I don't want to see how he becomes Spider-Man, or at least in that way. I don't want to see Uncle Ben shot again. These are just things that I don't want to see, at least not in long form.
Just not enough Kleenexes in the world for that, are there? I believe that Homecoming probably also did the best villain. Honestly, I think Vulture was Marvel's best attempt at a villain.
He was
real. He was a real person.
He's real. Like, I understand.
Who I thought that really had a grip on.
I understand that they have a defense for it. Like, the approach to Vulture's portrayal, acted out by Michael Keaton, which ironically, he plays Batman in the 80s film, but he also plays a main character in a movie called Birdman, and if you haven't seen that, what Birdman is about is essentially an actor that doesn't want to be taken as a action movie actor, and he finds himself pigeonholed into being Birdman, which is a superhero. So it's ironic to think that he went from being Batman to being in this movie about a Birdman who is pigeonholed as essentially a Batman-type character, and now he comes into Spider-Man Homecoming and is playing the Vulture, another type of Birdman kind of thing. But anyways, I understand that the cut and the idea with him was that he isn't a stereotypical supervillain. He isn't just this, like, mastermind or anything like that. He's not after that. He's very, very small. He very much just wants his own cut of the prize. He just wants to advance and be able to have things that he feels like he deserves. And I can understand that, and I like that. And there's certain things about that movie I definitely like. Like, for instance, that car scene whenever they're going to prom, and it's the big reveal that it's...
Right. I think there was good build-up on the tension there. I really do. I think that you could feel the tension between those two as, you know, the Vulture was realizing that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and he was putting those two things together, and he's like, oh, so that's how that happened. And you could see the change in demeanor from him. And I really feel like that was really well portrayed. And again, I think that Vulture was the best villain because of who he was. I don't think he was this larger-than-life person who there was no way you were going to defeat. He was just this normal dude who found some suit and put it on and was able to take that little slice of the pie. He wasn't trying to take over the world. He was just trying to make his own profit, fend for himself, and help his family. And honestly, at the beginning of the movie, he didn't even have any intention of ever...
pursuing him. Like, he was done. He was... Yeah. Would you say that's the best film? Is that, in your opinion, the best film? Like, I have a feeling I already know what your favorite film is, but I just for a good segue into it, would you say that is your favorite film overall for Marvel?
No, my favorite film is definitely Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. The rendition of that movie was the schematics of it, just looking at the overall aesthetic views, were amazing. I think that it was a better done Star Wars. So that's probably a very unpopular opinion, but I do believe that Guardians of the Galaxy was a better done Star Wars. And with the expanse of the characters, the different sites of the world, seeing kind of like the galaxy and taking it out of just being in Earth and substantiates to that. I know that Thor has Asgard, but I think that it was able to show a lot more of Marvel and what it is about, and that there is other things out there that we are going to see in future renditions of the Avengers and the Infinity Gauntlet and things like that. Not just saying that Thanos is a person who has come from outer space and now is going to be on Earth. It's actually kind of showing that there's this big expansion of the universe. And again, I think it was easily the funniest movie that Marvel has ever had.
I'd say so, yeah.
And I think that it was just the pace of it. It was fun. The music selection was great.
Actually, maybe not. Maybe it's not the funniest, now that I think about it. Although, the one I'm thinking of is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So...
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was funny as well. I don't believe that the movie overall was as good as the first one.
So you have seen it now?
Yes.
As of now. I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it was really, really good. I went into it with not a whole lot of expectations. I think that was a lot of what people were thinking.
Had zero expectations.
It's because the trailers, they looked fun and invigorating, but we were like, Marvel's doing this? This is a very different thing from what they normally do.
I remember asking you if it was really a raccoon. I was like, they're really going to put a raccoon, and they're going to have Batista.
Yeah, that's funny, is that Batista's one of the funniest parts of the film.
He's my favorite part. Drax the Destroyer is my favorite part of the movie.
And I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think it was a good film. I love the visual flair. I love the characters. I love all the characters in it, except for the people that lack... And it makes me feel bad because I'm like, Gamora doesn't get a lot of funny parts into it. And that makes me sad because I'm like, that's a one-woman character, or except for in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. But we have Mantis, or is that her name? I think that's her name, in Volume 2. And she has a couple funny moments, but usually it's not really her being funny. It's like Batista playing off that.
Right.
And
Do me!
And so... Like, the only thing I don't like about the first Guardians is it kind of has a it follows a very, very strict formula. Like, everything comes together in a very formulaic manner. Like, even the Rocket Raccoon points it out at one point, like, when they're sitting in a circle and all that stuff, and he makes a comment about it, like, they're like, oh, let's do this. I'm like, it doesn't change the fact that it's still, you're still doing that formulaic thing. And it's still good. It's still very good, but I think that I liked Volume 2 more in that regard because I thought that it had a different aspect to it, or it had a different thing to it, because the villain, Ego, I can't remember who it's played by, but he's a good actor.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember what his name is either.
He's...
No.
I keep thinking Woody Harrelson. I'm like, that's not right, because I know that's not right.
It's definitely not Woody Harrelson.
I know that's not right, but I've seen him in a lot of movies. He was in The Thing. He was in... and he's a great actor. But anyways, he does...
Oh, yeah, I remember what his name is now.
What is it?
Because of my good friend, Google. But it's... Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell. And like I enjoyed the dynamic with that. I enjoyed that they were able to that wasn't, I think, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with myself, you said that Vulture is your favorite villain. I think that Ego might be my favorite villain. I just thought it was an interesting thing to do, and the scene where they're playing catch and all that stuff, it's a little on the nose because it's like they're playing catch with that one thing, and he reveals that he killed Star-Lord's mother.
Right.
And although maybe a little predictable with some things, but the scene where, whenever he gets pissed off too, whenever not Chris Pratt, but Star-Lord gets mad, like that scene, he looks really, really angry, and it just feels like... The thing is, one of the best parts about having a movie that's lighthearted is that whenever you flip it on its head, and when you have even sprinkling a little bit of seriousness in it, it'll mean a whole lot more.
Right.
Because you won't expect it, and you're like, Jesus, I can't believe...
It's like watching Futurama in the episode where the dog waits for Fry to come back for all those years, and you're used to Futurama being like a really funny show, and then all of a sudden you're crying because the dog is sitting there waiting forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
I mean, Loki would be the best villain if we counted him. Like, I just don't feel...
I feel like Loki is
he's like
an anti-hero. He's like...
Yeah.
He doesn't really have that serious villain.
Because in the Dark World, he's more like a buddy with
he
Thor,
feels bad.
and then
like he gets to places where he feels bad. Like I feel like Loki would take over the world and be like, I'm gonna make this little section over here for you guys because I feel really bad about doing this, but I'm gonna keep these people, in shackles. But you could go over there for a little while.
With that, I think that my favorite, or the best film overall, at least in my opinion, would probably be... I've got it down to... Like, Guardians is definitely a contender, at least Guardians Volume 2, I think. But I believe my favorite film overall is Captain America Civil War. A runner-up, maybe Iron Man, the first one.
Iron Man is probably my second favorite. So, the first one.
Because I believe Captain America Civil War had... Like, it took things seriously, I remember Batman vs. Superman and Captain America Civil War both were released in a similar time frame, and they both kind of have a similar plot, where superheroes are kind of going unchecked, and, like, Superman needs to be stopped because he's causing all of this destruction, and in the same thing, Iron Man believes that they need to be put on a tighter leash because, like, they caused a bunch of deaths, and so they have a similar thing to it, and of course it's... Iron Man against Captain America and Batman versus Superman. But the difference between it is not only for the fact that Captain America Civil War is a very good movie and Batman versus Superman is very, very flawed, it's that although it gears more toward a serious approach, it doesn't stop being entertaining. It doesn't feel dreary. It doesn't feel desolate. It doesn't feel like it isn't a Marvel movie. It just feels like they're like... the tension's rising, and it feels earned as well because we've worked our way toward it, because we've seen Iron Man in Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, we've seen Captain America in Winter Soldier and in the first Avenger, and we've seen him, of course, in Avengers and Age of Ultron, and I feel like that's one thing that DC doesn't have the ability to claim, because we don't know the characters the same way, so whenever they came together for Justice League, it doesn't mean as much as whenever they came together for Captain America Civil War, where we know these characters, so we don't have to spend time building them. And now we can just, like... It feels like this was one of the first times...
through all the muck. I think there's another thing Marvel does really well, is that when you're watching the movies, you don't feel like you're watching a 2-hour-long movie. You feel like you have just breezed through it. It moves really quickly, and it doesn't make you sit there and build and build and build and build and build. You have very dynamic parts where this happens and it's followed by this, followed by this. There's not a lot of downtime. There's not a lot of time where you're just sitting there going, I wonder when the good stuff is going to start happening.
And that is a lot of the ways I felt whenever I watched Justice League. We plan to do a discussion of that sometime in the near future, but it seemed a lot of the time like with Batman vs. Superman, I was so bored through a lot of it, but I know towards the end I started getting a lot more entertained because of the action scenes. Whereas whenever I watched Justice League, I was waiting for it because I'm like, okay, it's bad so far, but I know the good's coming, and then it never came. And whereas with with Marvel, for the most part, I feel like I'm entertained all the way through. Even if there's some things I think they could do better, I'm still entertained, I'm still engaged.
Right, and I think that's one of the things with the comedy, with the ever-moving, action, is that Marvel is able to take you and transpose you from sitting in that chair watching a movie to feeling like you're breezing through something and maybe interacting with the actual characters and kind of getting more out of it. So if you're able to talk in the middle of a movie like, oh, that was pretty good, I like that was funny, and we're moving on to the next scene and it's already an action scene, and now you're sitting there on the edge of your seat watching the hero and wondering what's going to happen, and then that's done, and all of a sudden they're back to being funny, and you're talking and you're laughing. I feel like you're interacting the entire time with a Marvel movie. You're either laughing, you're on the edge of your seat, or you're wondering, what's going to happen next. And I don't feel like that is a strong suit of, the other superhero brand. But that, like you said, we'll talk about that in another video that we'll have posted after I'm able to catch up and watch Justice League.
And with that, I'd say, as moving on, it's a good thing that we talked about Captain America Civil War, because the next question is, who do you think is the best character overall? And I think that, in my opinion, it goes without saying. Like, I ventured somewhat to Star-Lord for a little while, but I feel pretty confident that Tony Stark is my favorite character overall. And I think, although in general for a long time, he was kind of the go-to reason for
they
Marvel.
don't pay Tony Stark $40 million a movie for nothing.
Like, for a long time, it felt like he was the character that you go to see. But at the same time, I think it was in Captain America Civil War, not only is he just an entertaining, charismatic person, but I realized he could have been phoning this in by now. And he just, his emotional, his portrayal was very, very good, especially because I feel like we kind of look at these movies as popcorn movies. We don't think about having great performances in them, when in fact, a lot of the times they do. And I think that Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal really captures the severity of the situation, and I think he really put the film over for me.
As he's gotten older, Robert Downey Jr. has just became a spectacular actor. In the first Iron Man, he did amazing. In the first Iron Man, it was probably the best portrayal of a character. And like I said, Iron Man has that lot of depth, and I think Robert Downey Jr. definitely portrays that really well and shows the different facets and the emotions of Tony Stark and Iron Man. And you were able to see that, and everything is interesting with Iron Man except for Iron Man 2 and 3.
But it's not bad because of him. He is the silver lining of those movies.
Right,
it's
not bad because of him, it's bad because of the portrayal of...
And I didn't hate Iron Man 3. It's directed by Shane Black, who's otherwise known for Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys. Both films I really enjoyed, and I feel like this film plays up a lot like those films. It's just not... Probably because they made a buddy cop movie into a superhero dynamic, and it just got lost in translation. It didn't work out so well, and of course what they did with the villain, which at some points, when I look back at the Mandarin, I'm like, that was clever, but I'm like, you still shouldn't have probably done that.
No, they totally ruined everything that they had built, because like you said in the trailers, you thought that he was going to be an amazing villain, probably the best portrayal of a villain, and then all of a sudden he's whiny, and he's annoying.
And you had Ben Kingsley. You do not waste Ben Kingsley.
Right, you had Ben Kingsley, and you had probably Iron Man's best villain. And you ruined both of them in the same stroke.
You had a chance to have Gandhi as your supervillain, and you didn't do it.
And then you threw in some random villain who was a throwaway, because I don't even remember what his name was. He was
still... He's like, I'm the Mandarin, but he was a different interpretation of the Mandarin. But he was played by someone, Guy Pearce? No, not Guy Pearce. Doesn't matter.
It's like expecting to get a cutie, but somebody gave you a halo, and so you're just mad, and that's exactly what happened. But yeah, I think that Iron Man, Tony Stark, is probably the best character overall in Marvel. But if we took out Tony Stark and put him on a little shelf over on the side as our favorite toy, and figured out who else are we going to play with Tony Stark, I think that would be the more of the question of who is the best Marvel character aside from.
And now I feel like I've changed my answer. It's still Tony Stark for the number one, but I think my number two might be different. What is yours?
I'm probably going to say that my favorite, and it's weird because, like I said, whenever I found out that this
is it Drax still?
It is. It's Drax, and whenever I found out that he was going to be played by Bautista, I said, this movie's going to bomb. This movie's going to be stupid. How are you going to put Bautista, a WWE wrestler, in here who can barely act a promo out inside, a wrestling ring? How in the world are you going to get him to be a good actor? And then I started thinking about, like, the likes of other wrestlers who have been horrible in movies. So I was like...
Dwayne Johnson, Stone Cold, John Cena when he was the Marine,
right,
and
the
those
Miz,
kinds of things. The Miz.
You think, okay, you're not going to get anything out of it. And it's not that Bautista's an amazing actor, because I'm sure if you put him in any other movie...
Probably most things he's not going to deliver.
Horrible. But for some reason, Bautista is Drax the Destroyer. Like, that is who he was made to be. That's why he was born, is to play Drax the Destroyer in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was not good at anything else. He tried MMA. He was horrible at it.
He won.
He won because the other dude was so out of shape and fat. That's not... that's the only reason. He tried WWE. He was bad in that. He wasn't the worst that I've ever seen in WWE.
He wasn't the worst in WWE.
He definitely wasn't good. He was not a great promo.
He had his moments.
He was not good in the ring. So I really thought he was going to be horrible, and then all of a sudden, I finished that movie, and I remember talking to you about it, going, I can't believe that Bautista is the best part of this movie. Like, Chris Pratt is definitely the best actor out of all of them, and that's probably not even in question.
Yeah.
But Drax the Destroyer is just hilarious, and everything that he does, I find myself chuckling. And the portrayal of him is just really good. Like I said, I think Dave Bautista was only born to play Drax the Destroyer.
I think, now that I've thought about it, although I would say, if I were asked the most entertaining character in the, aside from Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Iron Man, I was going to say the most entertaining is definitely Star-Lord to me. Drax is, of course, very entertaining. I'm thinking Captain America. And the reason why is because in the first Captain America, the first Avenger, I didn't like that film that much. I thought it was enjoyable, but I didn't love it. And the Winter Soldier completely blew me away because it was so good, and it was no longer a superhero film. And I know that a lot of people criticize superheroes because they think that it's become oversaturated. We see too many superhero films, and I think that I agree with that sentiment. But I think that at the same time, the answer to that is not necessarily to get rid of them, but to try approaching them in new and unique ways. Because, for instance...
Unless you're doing the new X-Men thing, which kind of looks stupid.
Which, the new X-Men movie looks like it's probably going to miss. But at the same time, the movie Logan did really unique things with it. And
Logan was really good.
And the new Venom movie that Sony's doing is probably going to be bad, but that's just because it's Sony. But there is a chance, and Tom Hardy's going to be Venom. That's pretty cool.
It matters if they give Venom an R rating, because if you try to
I believe
Venom,
it is going to be an R-rated film.
Yeah, because if you try to do Venom as like this kid-friendly kind of thing, you turn him into a weirdo wearing a black suit.
And as you said, Guardians of the Galaxy, you didn't compare it whenever you were asked to compare it. You weren't asked. But whenever you were asked about it, you didn't compare it to another superhero film. You compared it to Star Wars. You compared it to a science fiction. And it doesn't... although at times it still feels like they come together in a very superhero way, it doesn't feel like a superhero film. It feels like a science fiction on the order of Star Wars. And I think that's the answer. And I think that Captain America Winter Soldier developed itself as an espionage film in a lot of respects, and I started to really understand or enjoy the portrayal of the Captain America character because it's someone with strong moral beliefs who believes what he stands for and is willing to die for what he stands for. I believe it was I'm paraphrasing, but along the lines he says that fight for what you believe, and if you get knocked down, get back up again. They're never going to keep you down. I get knocked up. No, and if you die, then walk it off, or something along that lines. And I remember the Russo brothers were talking.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, the Russo brothers were asked about it, and they said that he has strong beliefs, and he does not change his beliefs. He changes the world around him to follow his beliefs by being consistent and fighting for what he believes in. And in a lot of ways,
sweet workout videos for Spider-Man Homecoming.
Those are great. And honestly, that you said Hulk Hogan, and that's actually an appropriate way to describe him, because in my opinion, that is exactly how Superman should be portrayed. And that is a very, very... It's not necessarily what America is, but it's what America wants to be. And it's... he fights for what he believes in, and that's why I like him, because I think he has a lot of depth with that as a character, and I think that's why I like him overall, even though he might not be the most entertaining character.
I don't even think he's the best part of the Winter Soldier. I think Bucky is probably the best part of the Winter Soldier. And, you know, the actor who does Bucky does a really well portrayal of him as
Sebastian something.
And I think that he was probably way more entertaining in the actual movie than what Steve Rogers was.
I think that he plays the character he needs to play, which is not very in your face. He's very, very understated. And he's pretty much a vessel or a template that all you know about him is his strong beliefs, and that's all he needs to be. He's an everyman, and
I think that's why I don't like him as much as, say, I would like a lot of the other characters. And it's because of, you know, a couple things. Is that Captain America is definitely not funny. He's very stoic and, you know, straightforward, and so he's not funny. And that's...
Would you say he's the worst character?
I wouldn't say he was the worst. I mean, because
that's the next question.
We have horrible villains, so I definitely don't think he's the worst character in Marvel. But I do believe that he's probably the least entertaining of the main Avengers. I mean, he's probably not worse than Falcon or anything like that, but he's definitely the most boring aspect. It would be like that guy that you sit down at a bar with, and you started talking, and he just droned on and bored the crap out of you.
But I think he's complimented by them, though. I think he's what he needs to be.
He definitely bounces off, but like think about it in the sense of if anybody watches,
and he's funny too. He's in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
I don't think he means to be,
but they mean him to be,
right. But I think that if you equate it to this, he's like that one guy. If you think about like wrestling, and you think about how much a guy like John Cena was hated, not because he did anything bad. He had good morals. He had good upstanding, but you always knew he was going to win. And he was overpowering, too strong, too good, and that's where I lost it. I can't connect to Captain America because I use the F word. I do have these sometimes thoughts that maybe not quote-unquote moral, you know? And I can't imagine myself being so rigid and being so pure and being so good and standing up for the face of everything that is right. I think that one of the things that Robert Downey Jr. does so well is he walks that line. You know, I
think that makes him bad. I think that, and that's why I said I don't think I looked at it strictly not the most entertaining character, but the best made, because he acts as such a good combatant against Robert Downey Jr.'s character. He acts as a good vessel for these films like Civil War and Winter Soldier.
He's one of the ones that hasn't developed as much.
I think he has, though. I think he's developed almost more than those characters.
I think he's been the same since the
first one. And that's his character. It's like, it's not necessarily...
Right, but there's nothing different.
I don't look at it as like a John Cena thing, because he makes entertaining movies. And, and, like, he has, like, I don't know, he has a courage and determination, and although that may not make for the most entertaining character aspects, I think that he's very true to them, and it's a very, very accurate portrayal of him, and I think he's what I would look for in a hero.
I think, but what I want to call it,
and he's not overpowered like
one-dimensional. He's one-dimensional. He has nothing.
But I think it's real is the thing.
He takes that big old scoop and just holds it the entire time and never spreads it around.
But I don't think it's one-dimensional, because I think he's very, very true to it. And it feels very, very organic. If he's one-dimensional, it's because he's a one-dimensional person, not necessarily because he's a one-dimensional character. Because I think this is a very, very real portrayal of this character.
I think I would have liked to see some more development with Captain America. I don't potentially hate him the most, but I think that he is probably the most boring of the major. I mean, he's probably better than Hawkeye or Black Widow, but he still is not as entertaining as Bruce Banner. He's not as entertaining as Iron Man. He's not as entertaining as Thor or Loki or any of those major players that you have in it.
So who would you say is your worst character?
Who would I say is my worst?
And also, what would you say is the worst film overall?
The worst film overall is probably going to be Iron Man 3 for me.
The thing is...
And I think it's because I was so disappointed. I don't even know if it was the worst movie.
I still think Iron Man 2 is way worse, but...
I got so deflated by Iron Man 3. I went into it, thought it was going to be amazing. Me and you went to see it together in theaters. Like you said, the theater was packed. A lot of people thought it was going to be amazing. The previews were, well done. You got in there, you sit down, and they just stomped all over your hopes and ambitions.
I feel like Marvel has a habit with that as well. If not just for making... Not because they make disappointing movies or anything like that, but because, like, for instance, with the advertisements for Avengers Age of Ultron, I thought it looked really, really, like Ultron looked like he was just a beast who was going to destroy everyone. And, like, do you remember the trailers for it? Like,
yeah, he was kind of like a pansy or kind of just a throwaway villain again.
But in the trailers, it was like they had, which I don't know if everyone else liked it, but I thought it was fantastic because they had the I had strings, but now I'm free. And they had the Pinocchio thing in there. And just the way it looked, like when he was broken and all that, I thought, I don't know, I'm acting it out in the video. But,
they can definitely see you.
They can feel my movements.
They can feel the tension in your shoulders as you wiggle
as
them
I try to wiggle them around like Pinocchio.
You just look like a broken marionette.
But would you say that in Iron Man 3, the Mandarin, not really Mandarin, would you say that's the worst character as well?
I would say that it's pretty close. If he's not the worst portrayal of a villain in a superhero movie, I don't know who is. But then again, I don't know that he is the worst character because, again, I lost interest. I lost vested interest, and I just kind of threw him away. I would say that in a good movie, the worst portrayal of a character, and I don't even know why. Maybe it's because I don't like the actor, but I do not like Iron Patriot. I think he's boring. I think he is probably the worst part of those movies, and it's kind of like, I don't even know why you're here. I kind of wish you'd just go away. And I think it was actually two different actors, hasn't it been now? Two different men have portrayed Iron Patriot, I believe.
You are talking about War Machine.
Am I talking about War Machine?
I was thrown off. Yeah, because War Machine, it's Brody. And in the first film, they had one actor whose name I am not able to come up with, but the second actor was Don Cheadle.
Yes.
And
I do not like him. I do not know why.
Like him. I
do not like him.
I don't know. I don't get excited for him in this movie, but I like him as an actor. I like him in the movie Reign Over Me. I like him in the movie Manic. I don't know how I feel about him in this movie in particular. He's likable, but he's not... Like, he seems very much like he's a...
It's just odd.
Like,
it doesn't mesh well.
I think that in Avengers Age of Ultron, whenever I first watched the Avengers and they introduced us to Hawkeye, I thought he was very, very dull. In Age of Ultron, however, I thought that he grew a lot of character. But that has not been the same thing for War Machine, and I don't think that Don Cheadle has... Or, not Don Cheadle, but the character Brody has been able to have one of those moments where he becomes truly likable. I would say that my least favorite film of the series thus far would probably be Ant-Man, which bothers me because I really like Paul Rudd. I think he's a very good actor, but I don't think that the film delivered a lot. And a lot of it's probably because a lot of the jokes and a lot of the humor was lost in translation because they had Edgar Wright, who's otherwise known for Shaun of the Dead, and films of that ilk. He got fired or stepped aside in the middle of production, and I noticed that a lot of the humor looked like it could have been funny, but it wasn't funny. And for my least favorite character, I would probably say, I'm honestly thinking maybe it is the villain from Iron Man 3. I can't think of anyone I really disliked more.
Like the real villain or
the real villain? The real villain. Like, because even though that was kind of stupid,
He just seemed like a normal dude that they picked up off the street and was like, "Here, I think you're gonna be the main villain."
His name's Adam Pearce. But actually, is that the name of a wrestler? Doesn't matter.
We're talking a lot about wrestling in this.
Yeah.
Which I guess wrestler, superhero, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. And with that being said, what would you like to see Marvel improve on, and where would you like to see them take the series altogether?
I think we're about to see what I want to improve on. I think that Thanos is going to be the improvement.
And honestly, I think I actually agree with you, because one of the things that I liked about the series overall is that it's humor and all this, but the stakes have never been really raised. I always feel like everything is not very self-contained. Like, I never feel like any movie is a standalone film anymore. Like, maybe I felt that way in the early going, but nowadays I feel like everyone want to talk like they know about Dre, but nothing comes out when they move their lips, just a bunch of gibberish. And I feel like they need to do a lot of... I've lost my train of thought. I feel like nothing feels self-contained anymore. And one of the problems I had with Spider-Man Homecoming is, like, I liked it a lot, is I felt like I always looked at what was more to come, and I wasn't looked in the moment. Like, it didn't feel like a standalone film. It looked like I was getting ready for Spider-Man to become Spider-Man for later movies, and I feel
Marvel
like...
character universe. It
feels like issues now, and
it feels like day to day. You know, it's like you wake up one day and you're following Iron Man. You wake up the next day, you're following Spider-Man.
And I like
but all you're really following up to is when are they going to meet.
And I like that, in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I never feel like there's weird. Like, you have your thoughts in The Dark Knight, and I don't really want to go into it. But I thought The Dark Knight was really, really good. But I felt like it was a complete movie. It was a complete experience. Whereas where I watch these films, and I think they're very, very good. But I don't feel like I just watched... Like, if I was recommending someone a movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know what I'd probably recommend them? The Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I couldn't single out them very easily, because there's...
I think Guardians of the Galaxy did really well, singling itself out. And I think that one of the reasons why we find ourselves with this this discussion is because of the fact that we ask ourselves when we're watching a Captain America movie or when we're watching an Iron Man movie and all this stuff is happening, I find myself asking, where's Thor? Like, why wouldn't Thor just come and help this? Like, it just seems like it would be so much easier. This little bitty villain that Iron Man now has to fight, and it doesn't seem like it's big enough anymore, because Iron Man should be able to just pick up the phone and be like, hey, Thor, you want to come over and, help me whip up on the Mandarin real quick? So that way we can just, take that out and I can get back to my daily business. Whereas Guardians didn't have that connection. They haven't connected.
And I think that's one thing I'd like to see them venture into more. I don't know a lot of Marvel characters off the top of my head, but I would like to see them do more with dropping phones than what they do now. Like, I was watching the new Thor movie, and I thought, nobody has dropped phones. And so I'd like to see them do that. But I'd like to see them go into different worlds. I think that Doctor Strange, although I didn't really love that film, I think that's a step. I think they're taking the necessary steps right now. I think with Infinity Wars, we're finally going to get the payoff. And I think that's a lot is how I feel when I watch Marvel movies, is I feel like I never get the payoff. I never get the money shot. And this one, like, it's just going to pour it all over me. And we're going to get the payoff. And then we can see where it goes from there.
So it's probably going to be creamy, milky. It's going to be it's going to be...
milking that cash cow.
Right. What you're going to get is, a good load of things. Is what you're saying. Yeah. Like, everything is just going to come pouring out. Emphasis on, like, the come and out. And so what we're going to see, I think, in the Infinity Gauntlet is Thanos stepping up and actually being a great villain. Mm-hmm. Being the head of, the movie and actually having something to focus on. And then you're actually going to, I hope, see, and I hope it follows closer to the comics. I hope it doesn't follow exactly, because the comics can get convoluted, and like some of the things in the comics, you're like, that's really silly, and I hope I never see that in a movie. But I think that if they just portray Thanos as the world beater that he is, and that gauntlet on his hand, with one crush of his hand,
I would like him to just destroy everything. Like, I remember in The Dark Knight Rises, like, we saw a shot of, like, and we had just seen The Joker, who was very, very psychological. He blew up a hospital, but he didn't really do a whole lot of damage. And then we had Scarecrow, who didn't do a whole lot of anything. But whenever Bane came in and he was just this brute and he just started wreaking havoc, like he blew up that baseball stadium and all that, I would like it if we just saw him just wreak havoc and like be...
I think Thanos is going to come out the gates hot and heavy. And what you're going to see is him destroy pretty much everyone in the first 30 minutes of the movie.
I want to see some people die. Like, I want to see, like, because I feel like everyone has, like, armor.
Plot armor.
Yeah, sure. And I would like to see some people, like, this guy be a real threat, because I feel like everything's just an issue building up to this. This is the defining moment. This is the pinnacle. Moment.
And I think that that's what's going to happen. I really think that Marvel's going to turn around our villain problem. We are going to be talking about Thanos being the best villain. We're not going to have to sit there and try to make up reasons why, Vulture was the best, or we're not going to have to look at it and say that
we're just going to know.
We're just going to know that it was Thanos, and nobody is going to have a debate. It's kind of like saying who's the best Avenger. We know it's Tony Stark. Let's put Tony Stark over here and start talking about everybody else. I want that for Thanos. I think that they picked a great actor to play him. I feel that he is going to do
Cable.
Cable. I feel like he's going to have an amazing portrayal. I think it's all going to come together, and that we are going to see Marvel take that next step and then finish out all of the plots for everybody that we've met so far. And then I think that, too, if that ends and we go back to the formula for a little while at least, of just building up those characters for the next round.
There's going to be... Spider-Man Homecoming 2, or whatever they're going to call it, is going to be right after the aftermath of the final Avengers movie, or the new, later one, or Infinity Wars Part 1. And then they have Miss Marvel, which I assume will be used heavily in the next Infinity Wars Part 2, or whatever they do. But yeah. With that being said, I don't really have much else to add, do you?
No, I think that we've touched on pretty much every aspect of Marvel. I think that we've touched on pretty much every aspect of the characters, the plot, and where I think we're going to think it's going in the future. So I think that we've touched on everything.
With that being said, thanks for watching this video. If you have any difference of opinions, if you have anything you'd like to share, things that you'd like to see us talk about in the future, feel free to leave a comment. We have plans to talk about Rick and Morty in the near future, as well as the DC Extended Universe, including a review of Justice League. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.